6:30 p.m. in our board meeting room. So thank you all for being here tonight. I'm trying to make sure you can all hear me. Is this better? Can you hear me well?
Seems better. Thank you.
Great. So thank you all for joining us. Just a quick reminder that we will do roll calls for votes. It's much easier for Ms. Ritchie taking notes and for the public record on this. So as we move forward, Deb will call out your name, and if you can affirm your vote one way or the other, that would be appreciated. Some quick notes on the chairperson's report. I did have a conversation with Chairman Zagrodzky today of the Board of Finance. In addition, they held a meeting at 5 p.m. It does look as if they will be considering whether to ask the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen to consider modifications to their budget. They are not sure at this point what those modifications would be, and they are working on their process to best decide that. So I would encourage everyone to stay abreast of those meetings. Additionally, if I hear information, I will confirm it to you via email, but I just wanted to let you know where we are. So I think this budget process will be a little bit different, and those conversations will continue. Besides that, we have been holding under CABE's organization weekly conference calls with chairs of the Board of Education around the state. We are all facing many similar issues, and I would say at this point I seem to see rather similar answers to some of those issues. But it's always good to be talking around the state and know both that we're in this together and that we are all committed to education of our children. I think that Darien has done an excellent job in terms of their e-learning in my conversations. I've been pleased to hear great feedback from parents. And Dr. Adley can also speak to that as well, but also in some of the questions from around the state, I've been glad to be able to answer, and Darien's been able to kind of provide just their model of doing it, which has been well received. With that, I think I am done for tonight. Public comment is on the email. Is on the agenda, and you will see we have a way for people to comment, which is to provide emails by 3 p.m. on the date so that we can get them out to the board. That does not preclude anyone who's listening now. You can always email me or the full board directly, and we will get that out. The superintendent did hand me some emails that he has received that the board was not necessarily copied on them. I will let you know just kind of quickly the gist of those, and then we will also, Dr. Adley will forward those to the board so you have all the comments in full. We certainly want to hear from our public and are doing our best in this environment to make sure, but please, anyone emailing in, know that all board members will receive your emails if you send them to Dr. Adley or I, so that your voices are heard and your thoughts can be considered. Heather Schudenboom and Deb, I do not always have addresses, so some of this we are going to have to rework for the minutes. Heather Schudenboom, Brooke Kennedy, one moment please, Cheryl Saba, Kristen Edwards, and I believe the board has that email already, Elizabeth Ivanchek, and Debbie Weigel have all sent emails in. I've just received them now, so looking over them quickly, they all are in support of continuing a traditional grading system for the fourth quarter. So after this meeting, we will get these out to you for your full review. And that will sum up public comment, and we will go to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to our parents who are joining us remotely. Welcome back to the school community from the wee break we had over a long weekend. I hope you were able to decouple a little bit, and perhaps from technology, and reacquaint yourself to your families in a different capacity. But thank you for rejoining us again at this particular meeting. I do want to say a very special welcome to an old colleague of mine, Mr. Christopher Tramberg. He's one of the Brady bunch that's in front of us here right now. A special welcome to Christopher. It's an unusual transition in. He sort of slid in the middle of the night and has been here working closely with the staff. But we're delighted to have him, and we'll look for ways for Christopher to connect with our school community. So welcome, Christopher. As we sort of conclude a month of e-learning, I'll defer some of those comments because there's an item on the board agenda pertaining to that. But I just certainly would be remiss if I didn't thank the staff, the talented staff, the supportive parents, and our wonderful kids for just doing a marvelous job, an exceptional job as our e-learning platform has continued to evolve. I want to thank the parents too, because without the parents and their feedback has been instrumental to our assistance along the way. This is a whole process of learning together, and anytime we're going to learn, we're going to sort of learn by mistakes and learn by feedback, and that has been much appreciated. I know our high school staff, our high school students have been informed about the May SATs, and SAT subject tests were cancelled. The SAT still is on the agenda for June, but that remains to be determined, I think, given the sequence of events. We did cancel, or certainly postpone the parent conferences. Our main task and our main thing that we're trying to do is really make sure that all the parents were receiving feedback through the e-learning from the classroom teachers, both students and parents. So that was where the focus has been, as opposed to the parent conferences. We'll monitor that as the need for that as we go along. We are planning, there will be an administrative question and answering session. You'll see that we actually purchased a new version of Zoom, so we'll try that, but we'll plan carefully for an event where there can be a question and answer session and some capacity from the public. Christopher Tramberg, he's working with the principals on a virtual kindergarten orientation as best as we can, so there's more to come on that. We are actively continuing to plan for ESY and summer school. Clearly with the Commissioner's indication and advice that, and the Governor's closure of schools through May 20th, those remain up in the air a little bit, but we have extended registration through May 20th. It is lower at the moment, much lower in terms of registration for the summer schools, as you'll see this evening. But in the event that we do come back, and in the event we can have summer school, we're doing that plan and trying to have that ready to go. I do also want to recognize several of our nurses who are participating at the high school and volunteering their time for the noble cause of doing assisting with the testing site. So we want to thank them for that. And this is a number of ways that our staff are actually working around the district. And finally, the district plans on rolling out a Blue Wave Challenge for the community. Chris is going to roll that out, and it'll be exciting, the opportunity for people across the town to participate in a fun way. With that, I'll defer my COVID-19 and e-learning comments to the item on the agenda.
Great, thank you. On to the approval of minutes, and this is where we will take it slowly with a roll call for Mrs. Ritchie. So it is requested that the board approve the following minutes. Minutes of the special meeting and executive session held on March 11th, 2020. May I have a motion? That's Maroney. And the second?
David, 2.
Mr. Deneen. And then Deb, you want to do a roll call for your vote?
Sure. Brown?
Yes, yes.
Burke?
Burke votes yes.
Deneen?
Yes.
McCammon? Uh-oh. McCammon?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Now
now.
we
Yes,
can.
thank you. Maroney?
Maroney votes yes.
Achman?
Yes?
Ritchie, yes. Sini?
Yes.
Stein?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, minutes of the regular meeting held on March 11th. Mrs. Stein so moves. A second. Mr. Maroney? Mrs. Ritchie?
Mr. Brown?
Brown votes yes.
Mr. Burke,
Burke votes yes.
Mr. Deneen. I think we lost him. Ms. McCammon,
McCammon votes yes.
Mr. Maroney,
Mr. Maroney votes yes.
Ms. Hoffman,
Yes.
Richie, yes. Sini, Mr. Sini,
Yes.
Ms. Stein.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, two more sets, guys. Minutes of the emergency meeting held on March 16, 2020. Mrs. Stein so moves. Mr. Sini, seconds.
Mr. Brown,
Mr. Brown votes yes.
Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Mr. Deneen,
Yes.
Ms. McCammon,
McCammon votes yes.
Mr. Maroney,
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman,
Yes.
Ms. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Sini,
Yes.
Ms. Stein.
Yes.
Thank you.
And lastly, minutes of the regular meeting held on March 24th, 2020. May I have a motion?
I'll motion Duke.
Duke moves and Mike Burke, you second?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Brown, you in favor?
Mr. Brown votes yes.
Mr. Burke,
Burke votes yes.
Mr. Deneen,
Deneen, yes.
Ms. McCammon,
McCammon, yes.
Mr. Maroney,
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman,
Yes.
Richie, yes. Mr. Sini,
Yep.
Ms. Stein.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. That also passes unanimously. We will move then, board committee reports. At the moment, the board is acting as a committee of the whole, so there are no reports unless Mr. Deneen, do you have any updates on the Oxbridge Building project you wish to share tonight?
Sure, real quick. The Oxbridge Building Committee continues to meet virtually. We've had some very successful sessions. The last session was one of the final design review phases. I believe Dr. Adley sent out that deck to the entire board. We've had a subsequent conference call on HVAC and architecture. We have to plan for the fact that Eversource is not necessarily going to get the gas lines up to that school in time. So Mike Lynch was on the call, and we've got a good dual burner option that we're working through. We have 2 more calls set up this week to continue and finish up design review phase, prep for a meeting with the state. And the next scheduled meeting will be April 30th at 7:30 a.m. in Town Hall.
Thanks, Duke. And just a point of information, Mr. Zagrodzky announced tonight due to his schedule and the numerous conflicts he has, that he will be stepping down to the committee. And tonight, the Board of Finance voted to affirm Dan Baumgarten, as the new Board of Finance appointee to that committee, just for everyone's informational purposes. With that, we will move on to presentations and discussion, a COVID-19 e-learning update, and I will turn that over to Dr. Adley.
So I'd just like to give the board the opportunity to do a wee bit of reflection, and also just to share kind of where we have been and where we have come in the month, and some of the issues that we're dealing with. So as I talk about the e-learning, I talk about a couple of matters at this particular time. One is just to give an overview of kind of where we've been. So we had the platform running, and the focus has been to support our staff as they've done an exceptional job in getting us up and running. I want to pay special tribute, if I may, to those who have really supported the curriculum, particularly those who have supported behind the scenes, somewhat on the front lines in terms of our technology department. They've just done a phenomenal job assisting our community and getting ready for e-learning, addressing any hardware and software needs. So they've done just a fabulous job getting the hardware in place for us. And we basically have been trying to get up and running as quickly as we can, as reasonably as we can, as reflectively as we can, and we have done that. And you are living it. You're seeing it in your households, most of you, and so you can see what we're talking about. And we've been able to get the online contact for children that we know is so important, and the feedback to students and to parents. We're trying to get that as quickly as possible, make sure everybody receives that feedback. But from the high school to the middle school, and listen, I think it's fair to say the learning curve at the elementary school has been more significant. But we've been able to hit the platform running, certainly at secondary level, and our teachers at the elementary school have done a fabulous job. Particularly, I did ask the community for a wee bit of space to take a wee bit of pause just a week ago, because sometimes, I mean, this is exhausting work, both for you at home, parents at home, and also for our teachers who are at home also with their families and also trying to teach. And I want to thank the community school community for giving our staff that space that they needed. And I think we've found that our staff has been responsive to that. So I'm thrilled that the focus over the past 2 weeks is making sure that there's e-learning experiences, online learning experiences for all children, and also feedback for students and parents for all the students. So that has been the focus for the last month. Moving forward, it will be doing that in a reflectful and thoughtful manner, and learn from our lessons along the way. A couple of things. Zoom, we all know and have heard in the media about Zoom, and understandably I've had some parent concerns about that. Thankfully, we have our staff, our technology staff, we're able to, in advance of the FBI making their modifications and recommendations on Zoom, modifying their platform. We had already set those settings, but additionally to that, I think it was Duke at the last meeting said, what do you need? But we went ahead and purchased a premium version of Zoom with security protocols in place. So you'll see that in the budget discussion tonight, and that was our way of really trying to make sure as much as possible we have that secure platform. Zoom is used by both elementary teachers and also secondary teachers. I would say for the most part, more extensively at the secondary level, but not exclusively. Certainly Google and Zoom are true platforms. It really would be unrealistic to wind the clock back and ask our teachers to learn a different version platform, software platform. So we went ahead with that particular purchase. And to a less, I think some teachers see Zoom as a more robust, versatile, and easier system for teaching. So it comes with a little more tools associated with it, but I'm pleased to say that we have a secure network, internal network as we possibly can. We're going to expand the free and reduced lunches starting on April 20th. We're going to provide lunches to any student in Darien Public Schools who needs it, and that will be distributed at the middle school. So if there's a student, they have to show the ID, the parent or the student will have to show the ID. But that's sort of complementing what we're already doing for free and reduced lunches, and it'll be just a new addition to that particular service. There are issues that are on kids' minds and are on parents' minds, and I know they're on board members' minds. They range from graduation proms, internships, to probably, if I may say, the holy grail, the grading framework. So graduation proms and internships, will say that you'll probably hear that the high school is actually soliciting feedback from the seniors on these matters, to just give them a sense in terms of graduation prom and internships, what their opinion on that might be, whether we come back or whether we don't come back. So before we will have to find a way, and will find a way, to recognize the achievement of our senior class, these exceptional young people. There's just no way that we're not going to do that. It'll just be a matter of what way we do that, what's under what set of circumstances, but we're determined to make that experience very, very special for our students. So rest assured, I know that there are no quick answers to that, but if we can't find a way, I don't know who can find a way. So working closely with our students, our staff, and our parents, we will make sure that we find a way for kids to experience those. special 12th grade experiences. Internships, we're not quite sure of kind of what's going to happen. We're probably not going to have internships per se. Before we put the final closure to that, we're looking at, are there any other ways that we can provide experiences for our seniors. But at this point, it seems nearly unrealistic if we do come back on May 20th, for students to be able to go for a really shortened period of time. It's really down to like 2.5 weeks or so that would be left given when we're actually graduating. And probably the rules and regulations about social distancing will still be in place, and many of our students go to hospitals and everything in between. So I'm not so sure that we're going to be able to replicate that experience, but we'll see what the kids may have good ideas also. I think they will, and we'll see how we can support them in that venture. So the last sort of last topic, so to speak, is the grading topic, and the board knows, and it's been in the news, and the commissioner has recommended a pass-fail sort of structure. I would like to share with you sort of just some framework and principles around which our staff has been working. The commissioner is also trying to support a regional approach to this topic. And so for the last couple of weeks, the staff has actually been working diligently and thoughtfully about designing a system that would recognize the achievements of all our students and be responsive to all our students. I think the first thing is to say that it's likely not to be the conventional grading system. I don't believe we can have a conventional grading system in an unconventional construct within which we're all working. But it will be a system that supports instruction and learning, engages students, and perhaps more than ever before in this public health crisis, it helps reduce the stress and anxiety of our students. I don't think we can underestimate that at this particular time. It should provide recognition for our highest performing students, for those students who have special needs of all descriptions and interventions, and those students who, in some cases, honestly, just struggle in high school. So those are some of the parameters and beliefs and philosophies around the design of a system. Please know that it will be with the best educational purpose, an informed decision in terms of the administration. So we're involved in administration up and down the system, both elementary, middle school, and also high school. So we are feverishly bringing that to closure at this point, or at least we're along the way. At this point, I would like to hear from the board in terms of some of their considerations that they would like us to be conscious of, or it's an opportunity for the board to inform this decision. And it would be, I just would like to extend the opportunity to board members either to comment or to ask for clarifying questions that we would address in whatever system we bring forward, or to make any other comment that they feel appropriate regarding this particular topic.
So I'll open it up to board comments and questions on anything, but Dr. Adley, can you give us, just as part of the framework, is there a timeline for when you think you will have this system in place,
So
or to bring to the board for their oversight role?
I do think it's important that we close this out fairly quickly, and all the communications that I've shared both recently before the break and also prior to that would be that we will have a system structure in place shortly after the break. So it's, by any count, shortly after the break. I will say also, we've been trying to work very closely with the surrounding districts to try and get on a relative same page, if that is all possible. So that continues. Superintendents have been meeting several times. So any system we do put in place will be within the context of what the surrounding districts, how they are responding, because I think it is important at least to have that particular context. We would be ready, the administration and the teachers would be ready to present this, I believe, by the end of the week. It depends what I hear from the board members in terms of if they're thinking of things that we are not thinking or considerations that we need to go back to. But I would be hopeful to make a presentation either Thursday or Friday to the board.
Okay, so again, I'll open up to questions now, but just what I'm hearing then is you're looking maybe for the board to reconvene Thursday or Friday. So let's keep that in the back of our mind as a schedule as these questions go on. Board comments and questions. I'll use your hands as best I can. So Mr. Burke's the first hand I saw go up. Mr. Burke.
As a procedural matter, is this something that we vote for or on?
So the board has an oversight role in this. There is not a policy in the state that boards approve grading policies. So I think what we'd really be looking for is certainly questions and kind of concerns and or observations tonight. And if we're to get back together this week, I think what we'd be looking to hear is the superintendent's plan as the educational leader. Votes would probably be if there is significant reason or grounds for objection to that plan. I don't know that we need a vote to affirm it because the board doesn't affirm grading policies. I think we need to exercise our oversight role in making sure the community is heard. And then I think the educational side of this probably lands on the CEO. But what I will do is clarify our exact role by the time we meet again, and do it quickly because it looks like we'll be meeting later this week. Hope that's helpful. Mrs. Stein and then Mr. Sini.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so obviously I've given a lot of thought to this as a parent, and we've received a lot of emails, and to me it comes down to one analysis, which is really an equity analysis. And to me the question is whether a reasonable portion of our students are at a disadvantage in distance learning for a myriad of reasons. If we, can reasonably assess that and say we don't have that issue, then I can see sticking with grades. But if we do have equity issues, I don't think you can do anything but pass fail. So that's my 2 cents. Hope you're muted.
Sorry, were you asking for me now? Tara, you're on mute, so sorry about that. Thank you for allowing us to weigh in, Dr. Hadley. I guess my 3 questions, and I'm definitely likely to defer to your educational expertise and your cabinet's educational expertise, but when are we going to give the opportunity for public comment at that next meeting is the first question. Can you give us some color on what the modified grading might be? And I know it's not finalized, but maybe just give us a sense. And then, back in my college days, we had the choice to go pass fail or take a full grade. Would that be a reasonable consideration? I see that option as maybe being helpful to those people that, are struggling in some way, shape, or form, but others that are looking to strive, for a grade point average for various reasons. Thank you.
You want me, so John, my initial reactions, I'll just take the public comment piece, is after we leave here tonight, we'll probably need to make sure we message out to the school community that a decision is later this week, and provide emails so that we can get as much information and public comment to the board as possible, given the situation we're in. But I think that's probably due to put it out to the community so that they have a chance to respond, or at least give us their thoughts and impressions. And Dr. Hadley, you get the rest of the questions.
Am I muted? Are we good? Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. So regarding sort of any additional description around the model, I think I'm trying to sort of at least give you some principles on which a system would be designed. Something I left out was, I didn't leave it out in the sense of equity for all students, but there's special consideration given to all the students at particular grade levels, because from elementary to what that looks like to middle school to all the transitions, 8th to 9th, 11 to 12, and even a third grade going to 4th grade, just with curriculum itself and teaching and learning. So all of those are special considerations that need to be considered. The idea of choice is one that I know we are looking at, so I appreciate that as a consideration. But I don't know that beyond, John, the sort of description that I've given, I really don't want to commit to a model tonight. I really want to listen. Really want to listen to the board's considerations and take those under consideration before actually. This isn't a by the way, it's not just a foregone conclusion. I can assure you of that. But we have a couple of models that we're looking at. So.
Okay. Did I see another hand? Mr. Brown?
Thanks, Tara. Just a couple of comments. Some items that were mentioned earlier. One, in terms of equity, I think we have to consider equity not only for certain parts of the community that are struggling. We also have other parts, as we've seen in the correspondence. It's coming from parents. We have other people who work very diligently to achieve high grades, and we need to make sure that they have that opportunity. To the point of giving people a choice, we didn't have a chance to offer them a choice previously. We're now perhaps imposing a choice of whether to go pass-fail or whether to go with the grading system they believe they had. So I think that the fact that we are going to make a choice, the proper outlet to that situation is to allow parents to make a choice as to what's best for their educational outcomes. Also, looking at the memo on April 7th from Dr. Cardona from the Department of Education, he noted that determination of grading policies and approaches is at the discretion of the local level, local Board of Education, which would be Darien. So I'm not sure why a regional approach would be proper. I think this is something that we should look at from the town. Also, where Dr. Cardona statewide is going to be looking at an equitable issue across all the towns in the state. For us as Darien Board of Education members, I think we need to look at what's equitable for our town. And we have a narrower consideration than the state needs to have at this time in making that determination. Also, there was a comment regarding the work they've done with UConn, the state schools, and on the conference call they had about doing some work with the NCAA to perhaps get the pass-fail option recognized outside of the state. We do note in the letter, however, they have no way of guaranteeing that private colleges or colleges outside of state will be able to honor or interpret the guidelines with a pass-fail if we should implement that. So I would recommend strongly that we stay with the system we started the school year with, which is the normal grading system. I think we have had relief valves, if you will, in terms of modifications to the length of education, the educational standards that have been given here by the state in terms of the e-learning. If we, for some reason, feel that that is not enough relaxation of the standards, given the circumstances here, and we must move to some format, I would strongly urge that we give parents the option to remain with the grading system they started the year with, or have the option based on what they believe is best for their children. If it's a choice forced at this point upon people from the expectations they had when they started the year. We do have that. I really think parents should be able to make the individual choice if they want to receive grades or if they would like to go to a pass-fail option. I think that's the only fair way we can do this at this point if we are going to make some sort of change. And Dr. Adley, I really appreciate you taking the time to let us be heard on this. Thank you.
Were there Mrs. Ritchie?
Okay, thank you. I listened in on the call from the Department
Yeah,
of Education.
Dad, could you sit a little closer to your microphone?
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I did listen in on the call with the State Department of Education, and they were recommending a pass-fail. My concern is they reached out to Connecticut colleges, but my concern is, are we putting our students at a disadvantage on a national level, and what is going to be the national standard? And specifically, I'm most concerned about our juniors who will be applying, some of them early decision in the fall. And these grades, having a senior who has just gone through the grades junior year are really the focus of the admissions counselors at these colleges. So I'm very concerned about that aspect of it. I understand about the equity concern in terms of our learners here in Darien, but I'm worried that we're putting our students here in Darien at a disadvantage if they're not given a grade. So I hope that that will be something that is put into consideration when this decision is made. Thank you.
Mr. Burke.
Thank you. Following up on Ms. Ritchie's point, I mean, I think whatever system is chosen, the greatest effect, one way or the other, will be this junior class. And I hope, and obviously I'm a parent of juniors, but I think that they need to be informed, or your decisions need to be informed on the disparate effect on that particular grade. And further to Ms. Ritchie's point, to the extent when you're ready to roll this out, that you can discuss the degree with which our counseling staff has spoken with colleges about how these pass-fail or grading fourth quarter impact will impact on that process will be helpful. And finally, again, when you're ready to roll this out, if you can then, in a very specific way, say, this plan, if this is the grade at X point, this is what your grade is going to be at the end under this system, all under the penalty of being able to have parents have a very clear and precise view where their students, especially the juniors, are going to be sitting. And thank you very much for all of your work.
Mr. Maroney.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Adley, for all of your thoughts and for allowing us to voice our opinions, I guess, on this matter. I think as along with my colleagues, I really like the idea of having a choice in this. Personally, I think it's a big decision, and how do you find that out? I'm not sure how you can settle and please everyone. Having said that, though, I'm struggling with the equity of it. And in my view is just if we go to, I think your point was it's a non-traditional learning environment, so we can't do traditional grades. I like that phrase. And so for me, I struggle with, how do we take we just went through the 10th grade test which seems like years ago now, but we just went through that. And for me, I think this is even more difficult. How do you control that someone doesn't take a test, take a picture of the test, email it? If our tests all have to be done at 8 o'clock, what if somebody gets up and takes the test and emails it to someone who takes it at 9? How do we know that student's taking the test, not the parents? How do we know a sibling's not taking it, an older sibling's not taking it? I think there's a lot of questions that I think we need to answer to do a grading system. But I also said on the other side of the fence, and with my colleagues as well, is I think there's a lot of, and I'll use the word fear or an unknown of junior parents, especially, of what are the impact of having a pass-fail do to their students or due to students who are applying to colleges. And I think that's something, as Mr. Burke said, it would be really helpful to have some feedback from the counselors who've spoken to other colleges and universities to get some feedback on what they have. The only thing I can say is I have 2 college students, and both are on pass-fail work now. So I think colleges are taking the approach that this is not a traditional environment and we're going to go to pass-fail. So I don't think that they would frown upon high schools doing that. It's just one opinion.
Mr. Deneen, is that a hand?
Yes, I just want to, I agree with everyone's points. I think Dennis's last point on colleges moving to a pass-fail based on their virtual classrooms is something to taken into consideration. I think the equity piece is important. I lean toward the option piece myself, but Dr. Adley, I lean toward your professional assessment along with your team. I think it's good to get the advice and guidance of the districts around us and what they're doing, but I still think we need to do what's right for our students in our district.
So I'll add in, I think our board members have all had a chance, and probably Duke, just to segue off your side, I think, and having children at each level of schooling, I can see how, as a parent, we feel this differently for each child and each of our child's learning situation. I think the question, and I look forward to hearing the educator's recommendation. I think the question we need to look at as a board is what are we certifying and what do grades certify? And then what are we asking it to certify in this environment? I think even as I heard everyone discussing, we're understanding how we're defining equity very differently. And so I think what's really important to understand is grades are a very traditional paradigm. They're very easily understood. Our educational paradigm has shifted significantly. And then the question is, does the assessment of that paradigm match? And I think I'm curious, I'm sure as you all are and all the parents watching, what the administration will bring forward. But I think that's really what we're looking at. What are we certifying? What are we saying? What are we saying this all means? And I know questions are around GPA, grades, college, all that, but then what are we also looking, what are our children taking away from this? So we will get information out to the public about how to comment. Dr. Adley and I will discuss timing, and I will get that to the board because I really would like full board participation in this conversation the next time we need to get together. And we will try to move this along because I do recognize that the school year, believe it or not, even though some days feel like Groundhog Day, the days are ticking away. So I think our students are owed an answer, so they kind of understand what their learning environment is. So without any other questions on a COVID update, although,
Ms. McCann.
oh, Jill, I'm sorry, I can't see you, but
sorry.
I hear you.
Thank you. So I think most of my board members have said the majority of what needs to be said, but I did want to add that I have heard some concerns from parents, particularly in the special education community, who are concerned about academics being delivered without accommodations or services, at least not completely, but there at least being a lag time between those two things. So I wanted to note that because we've seen a lot of letters about parents who are interested in grading, and I received these comments on the phone, so I just wanted to get them on the public record. Dr. Adley, I thank you for talking about a solution that really balances a lot of the different factors that we're working through, balancing keeping our students motivated, having them feel that they receive a reward, however we define that, Tara, to your point, and also understanding that there is a pressure unique to this situation. So I hope whatever model you do put forward, we'll be able to do that. Thank you for considering all those things. I certainly echo multiple ones of my colleagues that I'd like to hear a representative sample of how colleges are approaching admissions in this new environment so that we can assure our parents that we've considered that. And then lastly, I just wanted to offer for the record that I've heard some local private schools using a model where they will give the grade that you've already achieved as of the end of the traditional school year or higher, but that your grade can't go any lower. So just something to add to the pot of possible solutions. Thank you so much for your time and the opportunity to comment.
So Dr. Adley, does that give you, I have to imagine that gives you enough material to work with, but do you feel that gives you enough kind of board input at this point to move forward?
Yes, and I appreciate everybody's contribution and input into that, and that's very thoughtful and helpful. Yes, I'm good.
Okay. All right, with that, we will move forward to discussion and action on the educational specification for the home school roof and skylight replacement. Mr. Lynch.
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
If you want to talk to it, what those who are viewing on the screen will see is the related memos, we believe.
Very well, in a second.
But Mike, if you want to tee it up.
Okay. The part of the grant process for the reimbursement for the two roof projects is that the education specifications have to be approved at a meeting by the Board of Education. And so there's a form they have, SCG 1031. And the actual outline for a roof project of ed specs comes from the state Department of Administrative Services. This is a template that they want you to use because it is such a limited scope of work. And because we have two roof projects, we have to have two separate resolutions from the Board of Ed accepting the ed specs for Holmes and the ed specs for Hindley. The only difference in these specs is the project, there's different types of roofing. And aside from that, they're the same ed specs. And they're also identical to the ed specs we used for the central office roof.
Okay, anything to add, Dr. Endley, or any board questions? Although I need that screen so I can see.
Which one? Okay, all right. Just sensitive as much.
Bear with me 1 second, guys. I can't call them if I can't see them.
Oh, you're checking it back again?
Yeah, I
I
need,
beg your pardon, sorry. I beg your pardon. Let's see if I'll just close this out.
okay, any questions for Mr. Lynch? Okay, so with that, then I would call for a motion for approval of the educational specifications for the home school roof and skylight replacement project. May I have a motion?
Duke, motion to move.
Mr. Denise,
Second, Mr.
and
Maroney.
a second by Mr. Maroney, and then Deb, you could do a roll call.
Okay, Mr. Brown?
Mr. Brown votes yes.
Mr. Burke? Mr. Burke?
Mr. Burke votes yes.
Mr. Deneen?
Yes.
Ms. McCammon?
Jill?
Did you hear me? Yes.
Mr. Maroney?
Maroney votes yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Sini?
Yes.
Ms. Stein?
Yes.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Thank you all,
Brooke, I
guys.
disconnected. I'm back. I'll vote aye.
Got you.
I could see you. I got your vote in there, Mike.
Thank you.
We'll move forward to a discussion and action on the educational specifications for the Hindley School Roof Replacement Project. Mr. Lynch, anything different on this one?
Not at all.
Okay, so with that, may I have a motion to, I'm sorry, are there any board questions or comments? Okay, with that, I will move forward with a motion to approve the educational specifications for the Hindley School Roof and Replacement Project. Mrs. Stein, so moved, and a second, Mr. Maroney. Deb, you want to do a roll call?
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Brown votes yes.
Mr. Burke?
Burke votes yes.
Mr. Deneen?
Janine, yes.
Ms. McCammon?
McCammon, yes.
Mr. Maroney?
Yes.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Sini?
Yes.
Ms. Stein?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that also passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We'll move forward to the discussion on the February and March 2019-2020 financial reports and possible action on proposed budget transfers. Mr. Rudel.
Sure. I will share my screen real quick.
Can you mute us while he talks?
Can everybody see?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we do have two financial reports, both February and March. The February report was prior to school closures, so much of what is in it has changed, but we will highlight some areas prior to moving to the March report. So the February forecast was for a surplus of $403,066, or 0.4%. The general education RCs show a surplus of 579,906, while the special education RCs forecast a negative 176,840. Salaries forecasted at a positive 496,945. We had salary savings of 247,000. We were projecting custodial overtime for expectations regarding deep cleaning of the buildings. That will change though in the March report since we are closed. Budget control remains untouched at 263,000, and then student intern savings of just over 10,000. The operating section shows a positive 41,074. We do have some variances in consulting services, police and fire, positive areas in auditing services, snow removal, special education consultants, and then tuition, and then some negative variances in special education legal fees and pupil evaluation. In fixed, we are forecasting a positive $94,746, and that is attributed to our utility accounts, both fuel, natural gas, and electricity. Revenue is forecasted at a deficit of $229,698. The primary reason, again, is excess cost, which we have been tracking all year, a shortfall of $189,375. And then new to the report is ELP tuition. We did have less students this year than anticipated, and that did result in a shortfall of revenue of $43,000. And there are no transfers for the February report.
Are there any questions on February? Would you all prefer to move to March and kind of see some of the changes? Let's move. I'm seeing most move through to March. So Rich, why don't you go to March and we'll begin questions there.
Perfect. So the financial report currently does show a year-end surplus of $880,013, or 0.88%. The general education RCs have a surplus of $786,903. The special education RCs show a forecast of a current surplus of $93,000. We did do the forecast with an assumption that school would open on the first Monday in May, or May 4th. This was before the governor issued the announcement that closures would extend to May 20th. So when we do the April report, we will update that for the May 20th closure, or if any other feedback from the governor is issued extending that closure. Salary savings does have a large spike. It's up $948,424. We do have some additional salary savings from some positions that are vacant and not expected to be filled during the closure. That includes some paraprofessional positions, a driver, a nurse who retired, and then eventually a department chair position at the high school, which ended up going into a special education position. Substitutes are forecasted at a positive $108,000. Due to the closure of schools and e-learning, we are not having the use of daily subs. Budget control remains positive at $263 and untouched. Student interns is the same at $10,200. Athletics, which is primarily intramurals, is a positive $36,000, and then homebound tutoring, a positive $52,000. Moving to operating, we are forecasting a positive $353,000. We have a forecasted negative variance of $172,223 in consulting services, of which there are 2 transfers, both of which relate to the closure of schools that we'll discuss. Due to the closure of schools, we do have a variety of accounts such as textbooks, consumables, office supplies, teaching supplies, staff recruitment, staff development, that accumulate to about $252,000. During the closure, we have seen a significant drop in the need for placing orders. We obviously can't send items to people's homes, and the schools are closed and not receiving orders. Facilities is showing a savings of $43,000. This is in part due to the suspension of the garbage and cleaning contract. Sports officials show a savings of $36,000 as we are anticipating an abbreviated spring season, assuming we do open. And then transportation, including athletic transportation and special education transportation, show a savings of about $175,000. Legal fees for special ed continue to show a negative variance of $20,000. In fixed, we are showing a positive balance in home to school regular ed transportation of $33,000. New to this month's report is insurance. We did do a comparison of our current year census compared to the census that was used to develop the current year budget, which was the October 2018 census. And we did have 18 insurance packages drop off that census, which did result in a savings. Additionally, we are assuming that we will shift some insurance expenses from the food service budget to the operating budget, given that the food service budget has no sales as school is closed. Payroll taxes are projected at a deficit of $59,000. This again is a shift of payroll tax expenditures from the food service budget to the operating budget, because again, the food service budget has no sales to support its expenditures. Utilities are forecasted at a positive $135,000. This is an increase because schools are closed, so we are seeing a reduction in electric costs. That is driving that increased amount of savings. Moving to equipment, we have about a $4,800 positive surplus. We do have a negative variance in technology equipment, which does have a transfer to extinguish that deficit, and then various RC equipment savings of about $6,200. Revenue is showing a negative $760,173. Again, we do have excess cost shortfall of $189,000. Given the schools and fields are all closed, we are anticipating having a little over $100,000 deficit in field and building rental fee. Summer school has also seen a significant drop in enrollment. We are at about 30% of what our typical enrollment is for next year. And about 192 of 227 courses that have enrollment have not met the minimum amount of enrollment. So we are anticipating seeing less revenue for summer school. Again, ELP tuition shortfall of $45,000, and then a small surplus of Medicaid reimbursement. So we do have a few transfers, which the superintendent approved based on the authority that the board gave at the last meeting. The first is for $25,000. This is to earmark funds for the transportation study that we had talked about at previous Board of Ed meetings. The anticipation would be if we open school, the money will be earmarked so we can begin that transportation study. If we don't open, we will encumber those funds and have those funds on our balance sheet so that we can have those funds available for the transportation study without having to affect next year's budget. $71,123 for an adjustment for the Sodexo food service contract. Again, this is a reclassification of an expenditure out of the food service budget as we have no sales. $60,000 as a shift to consulting services from salaries. We have a vacant psychologist position. During the closure, this is going to be filled by a contracted company. Then a small increase in contracted speech for $13,110. $21,100 for technical support, tier 3 technical support during the closure, and then $11,120 for devices for staff to work at home. We did want to just highlight some of the areas of positive and negative that are within the budget because of the school closure. We do have forecasted expenditures of about $369,000, which include custodial overtime, field signs, gloves and masks, the food service expenses that we had talked about, the tier 3 technical support for e-learning, devices for staff, the Zoom software that Dr. Adley had mentioned, and then ebooks for about $11,000. We do have savings within the budget of about $921,000. That includes home to school transportation, special education transportation, electricity substitutes, athletic transportation, homebound tutoring, sports officials, the various operating accounts that I mentioned, music transportation, and then some positions that will remain vacant. And then we have lost revenue that I had mentioned, the field and building revenue, summer school revenue of about $530,000 between the two. The net is about $22,000 between all those accounts.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
First of all, thank you, Rich, for the supplemental memo that you provided, just giving us more detail on specifically how COVID and the school closures are impacting our financials. I just wanted to clarify that the numbers that you presented to us all assumed that school would reopen at May 4th. So in other words, all these numbers would have to be adjusted for the extension of the closure of school.
Correct. So in the April forecast, we'll have that updated. Our expectation right now is we'll see further savings in areas like electricity, fuel oil, natural gas, athletic transportation, school transportation, contracted cleaning, and garbage. We might see some additional increases in savings in the various operating accounts. I did assume an unused expenditure for the portion of the closure, and obviously that percentage will increase. We might see some small increases in technology that could affect that as well. And then we're also going to monitor our health insurance costs. One of the things that a lot of districts are seeing right now is for individual employees who maybe waived insurance and they were on a spouse's insurance. If that spouse lost their job, that would be considered a qualifying event to go on our health insurance plan. So we are watching to see whether or not we have any migration onto our health insurance.
Okay, and just in terms of lost revenue, those figures would also increase due to the fact that we're now extending the closure further out?
Correct. We would expect to see possibly a smaller decrease or a bigger decrease in field and building rental revenue. ELP, we've collected everything that we have. Obviously, there are no new students really enrolling right now, so we feel that that number is probably pretty solid for the rest of the year. Darien Summer School will largely be dependent on whether or not we have Darien Summer School. As I had mentioned, 192 of the 227 classes do not meet minimum enrollment. So that will have effect not only this year, but also in next fiscal year's budget.
Right.
Hey, Rich, it's Duke. Are the two drivers that drive the Suburbans, are they still on the payroll?
One actually resigned in March, and so that is one of the vacant positions that I referenced that right now is generating salary savings. And then the other one is on payroll.
And then do you have any kind of sheet that you've started that if we open on May 20th, what type of expenses you may incur to open, assuming a lot of it might be maintenance, cleaning, getting stuff relit, sanitizing, that folks will want to make sure they're done. But, you know, we're talking about savings, but if we have the opportunity to ramp up again, you know, I would start to build some idea of what the costs are going to be to ramp up again.
Sure. In the March financial report, we did not assume a significant amount of savings in RC12, the facilities and maintenance budget, as assuming that we're going to use a lot of the areas like maintenance supplies and custodial supplies to reopen the school. The custodian staff were actually in today to do another cleaning of the buildings. We're not expecting that to be on overtime. We're expecting that to be on straight time. But the majority of what we would see is probably in that area of custodial supplies, maintenance supplies, and then any repairs that have to be done in the building. The one area that's unsure of right now is whether or not there'll be any compensatory educational costs for special education.
Hey, Rich, Dave Brown, quick question on the summer school projections. Is that projected loss against projected budget at this time, or is that a calculation against fixed expenditures? My question is, if we don't have summer school, are there fixed numbers that we plan for that we'll be able to reduce? So as the net loss winds up being less, or is it too soon to tell on that?
Sure. So currently the way summer school accounting works, and which is one of the things that we're recommending to change, is for a period of years, we've booked the revenue whenever we've collected it, as opposed to booking that revenue as a prepaid revenue on our balance sheet and then releasing the revenue in the correct period. So what we're recommending, given the large balance we have, is to correct that issue. So for next fiscal year, if let's say we do not have Darien Summer School, we would also not have consulting services where we pay our providers for those programs. We wouldn't have teaching supplies that were needed to run those programs. So the net would be the loss of $630,000 roughly in revenue, but the net would be about $130,000, $131,000 when you factor in the expenses that we wouldn't have.
Thank you, Rich.
Sure.
Can I just ask about prepaid expenses and carrying over balances, because that's a concept that's new typically, and I was under the impression that the board wasn't allowed to do that. So maybe you could explain a little bit in further detail how now we're prepaying for something, but we're not going to be using it in the current fiscal year, but carrying it over to the next fiscal year?
Sure. So every year, the district, and even in the past years, you have what's called a reserve for encumbrance. So a good example would be like utilities, for example. You consume utility expenses on June 30th, but you don't actually get the bill on June 30th. Those bills tend to trickle in July and August and September. And so when you end the year, you typically have a balance of encumbrances that have not actually been paid, but you've earmarked those funds for services that are attributed to the current fiscal year. And when those services get paid, you pay it off that reserve for encumbrance account. It can't be blanket encumbrances. It can't be something where you've put a blanket encumbrance, let's say for copy paper or things like that. It has to be an actual known liability that you have. So if you have a known liability for, let's say, the transportation study of $25,000, once that bill comes in, you can pay it off that reserve for encumbrance account.
Okay, sorry, it was not letting us unmute. What I did say, Mr. Zagrodzky asked me today if we were projecting a surplus. I did say at this point in time we were, and I also did add in that this situation is ever evolving, and so sometimes there are unanticipated expenses. He understood. I said that, you know, Rich and Alan and the whole team were keeping track of this. We were reviewing, and that we would keep them up to date on what this would look like as a town and a community. We look to make some other difficult decisions. So we will stay in good conversation and communication on that, and hopefully that will all be part of the solution to much of what we're all facing.
Just mention that for next year, we're already carrying over a bigger balance or a bigger expense with the bus, the music modification to the department chair, and also the potential of the summer school. So I'm just saying that we have a bigger.
Yeah, so just to make Alan's point a little finer, when we took the expense for a bus out of the budget, and then we recognized we would need to find that within our own budget as a transfer, that's already up above and beyond. Then we have the FTE, a full-time FTE versus partial FTE of the music director. That's also over and above the budget. So we are going to have to watch this. There are expenses. We're gonna have to watch this carefully. And as we go forward and we have these conversations as a group, we are gonna have to look at what we've agreed to and what our budget is. So any further questions on financials and or transfers at this point? Mrs. Ritchie.
Just for clarification, these transfers have already been approved by the superintendent. Are you looking for the board approval as well?
Well, sort of. So the last meeting we had, we sort of deferred some decision making to the superintendent. But we're sort of, if we're going back to the regular sort of meeting schedule, which is perfectly fine. For this one, it's more of an appraisal of kind of what's taken place and an understanding for the board. If they want to resort back to the normal process, we'll have to modify it somewhat because the committees aren't really meeting. But if the board wants to resume a normal practice, that's okay too, because I think we're sort of, things change in the schools week by week and day by day, and I think they change, you know, I think at the board level and structurally over government too, so that's okay as well.
Yeah, so I don't see action on these tonight, given that we gave the superintendent authority, and the board can discuss now that we have the technical ability to meet, whether we relook at that or whether we need to. But tonight, I think it's most consistent, given that we gave the superintendent the authority to do these. He has made these, and that we are paid, that we stick with that. And then we can now reconvene now that we're in, it's hard to say, a more normal working environment, where when we made that decision, we extended those powers. But I think that's a separate conversation that I would look to have next time we get together.
This is Jill McCammon. Just in terms of keeping our numbers correct, given that the $25,000 approval has now gone through for the bus study and that number is in next year's budget, we just need to adjust. I know the $88,000 number is still a number, but we do know we have $25,000 already allocated for the bus study that we took this year. So just in terms of keeping the numbers clean, I think we need to reflect both actions in our conversation.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we will move forward on to discussion and possible action on board policies 1175, the prohibition against smoking, 4075, alcohol, tobacco, and a drug-free workplace, 1300, non-discrimination, 5710, non-discrimination of students, and 4250, employee checks, 4111, equal opportunity for employment and affirmative action and non-discrimination personnel. This is a second look on these. I will give it to Mr. Burke and Mrs. Sion to see if they want to lead this off.
Well, Mr. Burke here. This is our second look through. I would say unless there are any questions that you would have to address, that we need to address ourselves to with regard to these policies. We've had about a month to read through them on our own.
Anything, Mrs. Sion?
No, not unless there are questions.
Any board questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to, Marge, I can put them all together, right, unless there's objection? Okay, so.
No, please.
Yeah, it would be just easier with our roll call than all of these. So, assuming there is unanimous support, I'd like to make a motion to approve the board policies as outlined in the agenda. May I have a motion?
Burke moves.
Mr. Burke so moves. And a second. Mr. Deneen. Deb, I'll let you do the roll call.
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Brown?
Mr. Burke?
Burke votes yes.
Mr. Deneen?
Duke, yes.
Mr. Kamen?
McCammon votes yes.
Mr. Maroney?
Maroney votes yes to all.
Ms. Hoffman?
Yes.
Ms. Ritchie, yes. Mr. Sini?
Yes.
Ms. Stein?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We'll move on to action items. Mrs. Stein, any personnel items?
Just the appointment of Kristen O'Reilly as Elementary Program Director for Special Education, and we couldn't be more pleased.
With that appointment was also made under the powers extended to the superintendent, so we do not require any vote on that. Public comment, we have commented on all emails we've sent, and we will work to really get public comment as best we can. And I assure the public we are interested in hearing from you, and always feel free to email. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Stein and Mr. Maroney. All in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing that, Deb, I'm going to say that's a unanimous vote for your minutes. All right. Thank you all. Have a good, safe night. Thank you for being here, and welcome, Mr. Tranberg, one more time.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Peace out.